So the yang to physical properties are chemical properties. It's not really the opposite, it's just kind of yin and yang. I don't know. So chemical properties, when we measure chemical property, we have to have new substances are formed. So new substances are formed. What you start with is not what you end with when you measure this property. Okay. Now I know down here I say a chemical reaction occurs, and it's the same thing. Actually, new substances formed and chemical reaction occurring is the same thing. So chemical properties are destructive tests. I used to work in a environmental lab, and when we sent away a sample for testing to find the properties of that water or soil sample, the lab receiving that would make sure that they would do their physical properties first, non-destructive, and then their chemical properties in general. So examples of chemical properties are listed here. So for instance, will something, some matter, will it react with water or not? Question mark. Now, sometimes it's hard to know, for instance, if a reaction has occurred, and we're going to see some videos, but if we get new substances are formed as that something reacts with water, then that is an example of a chemical property. Will that, we talked about burning paper, will that paper burn? Okay, now when we burn the paper to see if it will burn, we are destroying the paper, okay? It's a destructive test. New substances are formed. A chemical reaction has to occur to measure that chemical property. Decomposition, okay, will it break down? Okay, so let's see, I think I have a couple videos. Again, sometimes it's hard to tell, did a chemical reaction occur? But see if you can see the chemical reaction occurring here.
The reaction of sodium, an alkali metal, with water is more vigorous than that between lithium and water, and less than that between potassium and water. Hydrogen gas is produced in each reaction.
So hopefully you would, if I were to ask you what happened there, most people would say, well, the solid went away. And that's true. Now, dissolving is not solubility is not a chemical property, but in this case, did you hear the fizz? Okay, that fizz actually was related to the release of a gas. And so new substances were formed. That gas was in the new substance that was formed. Let's see about the next one here.
One form of the element phosphorus must be stored away from oxygen, in this case, in a beaker of water. When exposed to the air, it reacts violently to form tetraphosphorus decaoxide.
So in this case, notice we have a solid left, but that solid looks different than what we started with. And of course we saw energy released. Now not always when energy is released does that mean that a chemical reaction has occurred, new substances are formed, but sometimes. Yeah. So, and I was thinking as I was watching that video, I'm glad not all matter is reactive with oxygen like that. Right? So we'd be in trouble. Let's see. So I'm not sure if you have these filled in your notes or not, but now these, and you'll have a section on your test that's like this. So I'm going to ask you questions about a property, and you're supposed to, in this case, say, is that a physical or chemical property? So any sort of color is, of course, a physical property. So the first one's physical property. Color of sulfur is yellow. The next one, iron is transformed into rust. Now, you may not know this, or you may know this, but iron, of course, is Fe. That's the symbol for the element iron. And rust is actually iron oxide, FeO of sorts. So new substances are formed. So the fact that iron can transform into rust, that must be a chemical property. Dynamite can explode. The fact that you get something different, does this make sense? Then that means that new substances are formed, so that's a chemical property. Not everything explodes, thank goodness, right? The density of anything. Now, density is a division problem. Density is what we call a ratio of how much mass you have crammed into a particular volume. So actually, to measure the density, all you got to do is get the mass and the volume. So those are both non-destructive tests, and so that is a physical property, density of anything. And we talked about this one before. This is a transition temperature. Aluminum melts at a pretty high temperature. We'll talk about what K is. Actually, that's temperature in the Kelvin scale. But the fact that aluminum transitions from a solid to a liquid at that particular temperature, even when it transitions, we still have aluminum. So no new substances are formed. So that's an example of a physical property. And last but not least, we have another color. So here, the fact that the formation of chlorophyll, okay, that what plants do, that actually is a chemical process, but just the color of it is a physical property of chlorophyll. Okay, very good. And then, dun, 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 we get to the assignment slide.